Hi, everyone. I'm here with Larry. He's a longtime IT services executive, part of original team at Cognizant and investor. Started and sold a number of IT services companies. Current venture is AI Realities. It's a value-added reseller of AI products and services. And we're going to talk about market positioning, sales, client acquisition, lead generation within IT consulting industry. Hi, Larry. Great to have you here.
Hey, Matt. Good afternoon. Great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for jumping on today. So, hey, let's just kick things off. And I know you have slightly less optimistic point of view on, lead generation, client acquisition for IT consulting companies, small IT consulting companies. Can you talk about it? It's really interesting point of view that you shared with me before.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and it's backed by data too. IT services companies are not doing well currently. The publicly traded ones, stocks are down, valuations are down, growth is down. And when I talk to my friends and colleagues and ex-colleagues, how's it going? When it's an honest conversation, it's tough, Larry. New clients are tough to come by. Um, a lot of clients are investing in operational excellence and not in marketing and sales. And it's a saturated market. It's a highly competitive market. Um, Big companies are looking to grow existing customers and take what they can get that way, and maybe, steal a big customer from, one of the major competitors. Other guys, they have their core customers. It's someone they worked with in the past. It's their cousin. It's someone who's respected them greatly throughout a career. But that doesn't scale because there's only so many people in your personal network that are able to do that deal for you. So God bless people who are making a nice living, providing great customer services and great customer satisfaction to their existing customer base, occasionally adding a new customer, but no one is doing awesome sales and marketing and adding customers at a rapid clip in a highly scalable way. And that's for a lot of segments. That's for majors. That's for MSPs looking to add small local businesses. That's digital agencies, platform engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that time in the cycle. There's been other great times in the IT services cycle, going back to client server and Cambridge Technology Partners, e-commerce, Buy-in, Scient, Razorfish, cloud engineering, with Cloud Sherpas in the Salesforce space. My friend Dave Northington built and sold that company. Um, and those are, depending on how you define a generation, once in a generation, twice in a generation, IT services opportunities. Something's new. A few people are the only guys who get it. Clients flock to them. Otherwise, it's scratching and clawing and being very gritty about getting new customers. And there's things you can do and things you should do and expectations you should set. Um, if I'm lucky, AI is another one of those because I have an AI company. It might not be. I mean, I talk to plenty of people who say, if you're CoreWeave, you're doing great in AI. If you're NVIDIA, you're doing great in AI. The Googles, the Claudes, the co-pilots. Yeah, but it's tough to sell very practical AI-based applications that improve either operations or revenue generation, although I've seen some. And there could be a pony in here somewhere. It'll take some time to tell. But I think it's cyclical. And, there's secular trends. And, of course, teams have to execute and teams have to be good. Teams have to invest in the right things and make the right decisions. So it's not easy. It's super competitive. Everyone I compete against and work with, they're really smart. Some of these guys, they graduated first in their class of 1 million people. So it's not easy, but it can be, rewarding.
So, like, in terms of let's dive into positioning first, just to set this stage. Most of the people watching or listening to this, they are typically small IT consulting company founders, typically from Europe or from the US. And they are at this stage of figuring out, how do I know, what do I sell? Like, they can do a lot of different things, right? They can code, they can sell software. They're trying to figure out, what is my offer? And how do you think they should be thinking about it to have any chance on the market right now?
Um, so you noted I'm a bit of an iconoclast, a bit of a contrarian, a bit of, we could call it negative, but I'm not a negative person, right? But you got to be realistic as opposed to, making things up. You got to dream a little bit, but you got to temper it and you got to pick the right time to do things. So I think the traps a lot of people fall into is they have a good business. They're making a living. Maybe they have a great lifestyle. Maybe it's a lifestyle business. Maybe they do want to scale it and take on investors and ultimately sell it. But the traps I see is add a lot of tech stack expense. Um, it it's not a game of where you need to manage 10 or 20 or 30,000 customers. Really? The people in our space, the small IT services, you have five good customers. If you add three a year, you're doing great. And then it's 10 a year. Like Ken Olson said, you could probably manage it on an index card, but get a HubSpot or a Zoho or something. Because it helps a little bit. But don't, mass emailings isn't going to help you. Um, Content is good. It helps people make decisions. Your website is good. It helps people make decisions who probably all already know you. I don't think I've ever had someone visit a website that I've built, and this is, you mentioned some of the companies, and said, wow, that just blows me away. That's completely different. I think I'll call this guy up and do business with him. It doesn't work that way. Um, what has worked in the past, but this is not a terrific solution for small guy yet, is the Gartner Group is huge, right? They send people customers, but you got to be big. You got to have enough customers where they can interview them and you can prove that you're legitimate. Now, early on in a new technology cycle, which maybe we're in one, if you have three or four customers, that might be enough. So, new technology where the customers can talk convincingly in practical terms on why they adopted your services, super helpful. Super helpful if you do that in an event, or it could be a webinar. In-person events are better. People still like local faces to talk to. Um, the other trap I think people fall into, it's an old venture capital trap. They don't do this so much anymore, but they used to say, and it was a satisfactory answer. It's like, well, how are you going to scale up? How are you going to get to 16 million in the first year? Well, we're going to hire four salespeople and we're going to give them each $4 million targets. There's 16 million and everybody, that's a great idea. It's like, it doesn't work that way, and then you get into the cycle of, I think I'll hire better salespeople or different salespeople or new salespeople. It's not about the people. It's about, at above some level, right? Um, it's about the product and the positioning and um, your current customers and your current customers referring you and talking about you. So don't go out and hire a bunch of salespeople. If when you hire salespeople is when the phone is ringing too much and you need people to answer queries. It's a falsehood to think I'm going to hire salespeople and they're going to bring me business, because if they know somebody, they know it from a previous job. That company's already under contract with the last people they worked for, or they're happy. I have customers, and I'm sure many of your listeners are in the same position. My customers are really happy. They're not paying rock bottom prices. They're paying competitive, good prices. But we don't screw up. If we do screw up, we fix it really fast. Um, they enjoy working with the people, the engineers on their team. They enjoy working with me, frankly. So, you can associate that, your listeners can associate it to them. Not real scalable, but the customers aren't going anywhere. There's switching costs. We've passed security certifications. We've passed them a number of times. The teams are happy working together. Everyone knows their role. Everyone's sort of succeeding and getting ahead a little bit. They're not switching. So those are a few of the fallacies. I think what the founders have to focus on is differentiated services, not losing customers, maybe growing them a little bit. And when the next wave comes along and they believe, double down on that. And if they start seeing traction, then go spend money on marketing and go spend money on salespeople. And, you know, Cognizant, big company, right? Fortune 500 company, S&P 500 company. And when I started, we were, a few guys, and it grew. It's like 260,000 people now. Um, because one, there was a secular trend. Two, we were, great at retaining customers, and our customers helped us. They spoke for us at events and in webinars and in press releases and generated content for us. And people trusted us quicker because we had our customers saying that they trusted us. So when the little guys start seeing that, then go start hiring people and doing marketing things.
And a lot of this aligns with companies I know. I'm talking about small companies, for example, small MSPs. They say the same thing. Like some of them, they tell me, "I've never lost a client." Like they never lost a client. They just keep them, right? It's the switching costs are so high, but then just bringing it home to positioning, right? Talking about a lot of things that work and don't work and different like client acquisition channels. What those small companies, what do you think they should think about when they think of a new service? Like, what should they be focusing on? What do you think? Like, I think you believe a lot in being on the cutting edge of technology and positioning yourself within some up and rising technology, like focusing rather on something that's hot right now in the tech rather than jumping on something that's already very saturated. Like, you don't want to just do something simple. Or do you think in a different way? Like, what do you think? How they should even think about it? Like, how should they think? How do you think they should think about what do I offer? Where do I even start?
There, there's a there's a great movie. It's a little dated now, but with Billy Crystal, um, Curly's Gold, and the guy constantly he's asking, "What's the secret to life? What's the secret to life?" Curly's like, "There's one thing." What is it? What is it? The tourists want to know. What is it, Curly? And you know, there's one thing. What is it? And at the end, it's revealed. It's like, what do you believe? Who are you? What's important to you? You got to know who you are. It's like if you're a guy or gal, you want to do cutting edge. I know I want latest, greatest, cutting edge. Experiment with it, be agile about it, see if it's got legs, see if it takes off, do the right things. That's who I am. If you're not that guy, if you're like, you know, very
Let's say
operationally focused, you
SAP
know,
consultant in some old-fashioned module kind of thing. Some people
do
are like
do
that.
SAP and
Hmm.
Salesforce and Microsoft resales. It's a great market, slow and steady. It pays dividends, but you got to be comfortable in that's what you're doing. I had luck early with doing, you know, exciting, new, complex things. So, and I can afford to stick with it.
Yeah, because it could also be a trap, right? You just like, hey, I'm just gonna start jumping on that AI automation things, and everybody's selling it, messaging people on LinkedIn, being like, hey, I can automate things for you with AI. But that sounds like it could also be, saturated and competitive.
Yeah, we go with very discreet, very DISCRETE, very specific, proven ways of saving people money or doing something better. And we test it. We actually have a methodology where our customer advisory board, our close customers, we do some presentations and demos. They might trial it and they'll say, yeah, go with that. Or no, it's no good. Because I might have my thoughts about whether it's good or not. I could easily be wrong, but you get input from, it turns out to be 6 to 10 customers. I'm probably either onto something or I'm not. Let's move on, try again, tweak things. Maybe things are a little different. Like we're looking at, one interesting uh, trend lately, Matt, is companies cutting back on IT services, digital agencies for revenue generation. Like, I think revenue generation is the most important thing because I'm a sales and marketing guy. But they're like, you know what? It pays off at a large scale, like e-commerce or pharmaceuticals, or it doesn't pay off if, like, that the handful of your customers numbers 500 in the world. Um, they're cutting back on investments in people in digital marketing and focusing more on operational excellence. Like, in uncertain times, I know if I save 10% in this process, it's worth X amount of dollars, as opposed to maybe I'll generate more revenue. They're like, it's real money either way, but this one is a lot less risk. So they're going with that. So that's what we're sort of selling into, except we have one solution that, it kind of plays into the strengths of AI. It's highly automated. You don't have to have a whole team or a whole agency. One AI engineer can build you a soup to nuts automated with in the sequencing. Then it goes to manual. A real person has to make a real phone call to someone, but they're not going to sit there all day and make dial for dollars. It's like it's one phone call a day. The same person could be doing, that, right? And, an automation between building the website, updating the website, collecting customer data or prospect data, sending them emails, following up, in an appropriate way, right? Uh, and doing the social media marketing. You don't need big marketing teams, and that falls into the operational excellence because in my neck of the woods in New Jersey, there's some pharmaceutical companies here. They're going through their third or fourth restructuring. I mean, laying off thousands of talented people. And there's a lot of pharmaceutical. I mean, these are serious, talented people in the middle of their career, and they're automating the marketing, and cutting back on the marketing, thinking, if I'm going to get that kind of return, uh, if I apply operational excellence, cost cutting, and automation to a few things, I don't need these people. So I think that's how customers are thinking about AI now. It's not as rapid in uptake as one I hoped or thought it would be, because it seemed pretty obvious, having been through RPA and having been through, BPO and business process reengineering. Um, there's some security concerns sending data off-prem, you know, um, to the AI engines. There's, fear of mistakes. Am I going to make a serious, blunder in front of customers because, the AI said it was an okay thing to say. Um, it's not easy. It may not be the next big thing, but for now, people are looking at it. So you want to get in front of people, like, Cognizant early on got in front of people because of Y2K. Well, turns out now they do lots of really complex things.
And what else is happening on the market? You talk a lot about market trends, just, like how you see it. What else is interesting to you that's happening on the market in general right now? You're like, where do I
Oh,
even start? How
yeah,
much
yeah.
time do
There's
you
where do I
have,
even
Matt?
start? Or I'm pretty focused. I'm a bit of a one-trick pony these days because I was on top of the cloud stuff. That was a big trend. We got
Hmm.
into new pretty big customers because of DevOps and engineering AWS and Microsoft. Um, you know, what I talked about, that's the only thing I see. I just don't have a lot of ideas in my head. But when I get one, I kind of stick with it. I think 18 months is sort of always a good, give it a ride for 18 months. See if, even if one customer adopts it, then all of a sudden you're in the position of, well, I have revenue and they seem to like it. And maybe there's others and, maybe you make a living even. So,
Right. Yeah. No, the reason why I was asking is because I've noticed that whenever there are some bigger market trends, I've seen it with like DevOps, for example, before, and I've seen that a lot of small, like, IT consulting companies with like a couple of, like bunch of like two founders, when they were jumping on it. without much marketing, they were able to get clients like relatively fast, simply because there were not that many people doing that. I think it has changed a lot now, and you know it the best, right? Like it's not a new thing in any way anymore. But I'm always trying to kind of like sniff out what are those next things that we can tell people to like think of or get into, even if they don't know what they are, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, the customers really know.
Hmm.
But for the small guys, it's not, the big Fortune 500 or whatever global 2000 customers. Y- I don't think they're doing anything that are secrets, but it could be in their market. I mean, they might be the best, or we, right? I'm small, best positioned to succeed. Like, we work with a company that automates the supply chain and the marketing for medical supplies, gloves, latex gloves that are disposable, stim pads for chiropractors, masks. They've been selling and making this stuff for, I don't know, 100 years or however long it is. And they're looking for new ways to, navigate disrupted supply chains and, the way customers buy, the way chiropractors buy. That might be the best opportunity to apply, easily digested. It has to be really low cost, like $100 a month low cost or $200 a month low cost, right? Easy to implement, easy to understand, which kind of goes back to don't do something blazingly new, just make it better mousetrap. Um, I'm seeing that that's where there's a bit of opportunity because my philosophy in AI is, it's got to be cheaper, faster, better, like really low cost. And say you're a little medical supply dealer, you're not going to go hire three marketing people. It's just you haven't done it in 30 years. You're not going to do it now. But for a couple $100 a month, if you can do better marketing and get a little bit higher yield on what you're doing, you're going to do it.
And then diving into, so we talked about positioning, we talked about market trends. You started talking about sales, client acquisition, lead generation channels, things like that. Can you talk more about things that you think don't work? I know you're not like the biggest fan of sending, or I think you're not the biggest fan of sending like, like cold email with like, hey, do you want to buy my service? Or, like a cold LinkedIn message. Can you talk to me about what do you think doesn't work? And how do you think you could tweak that so it works better for those folks?
Certainly not mass emails, not massive social media links, um, not, it's tempting to apply the lessons and methodologies of large scale marketing, mass marketing to small scale needs. And I think that's a huge mistake because, there's a few things. One, you got to pay for your tech stack. Two, someone's got to do it. Three, it once you start doing things that are a waste, you start wasting more time and effort and energy fixing the things because it was wasteful. So don't do it. Um, I think that's pretty useless. I think hiring a bunch of salespeople is pretty useless. You know,
Sorry, salespeople out there.
sorry, salespeople out there, but if you see demand, hiring one really good one's a really good idea. Or building a really good one, or creating a really good one.
Like
Um,
part of like being very close to you, part of being the team, and not just being like, hey, you're just an employee, but like you're part of the team. You're really working with them to figure things out, kind of situation.
you got to figure things out for the customers. And the salespeople I know are really good. And oh, now there's been another reorg and they're out of a job and they're going to bring in the new guys. Like the new guys aren't going to do any better than the old guys. Same process, same tool set. So, go hire a sales guy, Mr. Founder, co-founder of an MSP or small services company. When you can't go to your kids' softball games or play tennis or whatever it is you do, go bike riding, in the daylight after work because you're working too hard, then hire a sales guy. if you can do the one or two sales calls during the day, do them.
So what you're saying as a founder, co-founder, you want to be in sales as much as possible for as long as possible until you're really busy.
Yes. And that's what makes founders of these companies unique. They can do the tech and they can do the sales.
Because I feel like people are just like trying to get away with it of like, hey, I don't want to sell. I'm just gonna hire salespeople or a marketing agency without knowing how to do it by themselves. And I feel like it never works.
It does. I agree with you. It doesn't work. They got to do it themselves. And then, I've had great bosses. I've just had great bosses. One of the great bosses, he's passed away now. Bless his memory. Jerry Cohen at Information Builders, and Information Builders at one point was the largest private software company in the world, in New York. And the head of sales would tell stories of it was like him and Jerry and a few coders in a little rented office in New York City back in the 70s, started the same year as Microsoft and Oracle. And the phone would ring. And, depending if the sales guy answered the phone first or if Jerry answered the phone first, that was what his commission was based on. So they had something good. And the phone was ringing. And it was like, and Jerry wanted to sell the customer. Called it an elbow sale. I want to sit at the customer's elbow and go through the screen with them. It's the same thing as demo today, and sell him. He loves selling, and you know, it was a really big software company, um, ultimately, and he loved doing his management stuff and his investor stuff and his coding stuff and he liked doing it. So, yeah, that's a lesson I took to heart.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, eat that frog kind of situation. I feel like a lot of folks in IT or IT consulting just like by default they think that, hey, I just don't love selling, but it's kind of like a prerequisite. So that way you can build your team, then he can coach that salesperson you're talking about. He can be the role model to them. It's like it's tough to kind of like build software and have a bunch of engineers if you don't understand how it works. And I feel like when they're starting out, and I'm not sure what you think about it, Larry, but when you're starting out or somebody's starting out, I feel like the whole business is kind of like a go-to-market situation. Like in startup world, people use term like GTM, go-to-market a lot, like validating idea of the software and things like that. I feel like it's very similar with with services. Like you gotta go out there and talk to people and like feel them out. What is it they want? What is it they don't want? What do they resonate with? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I totally agree because, people are making a pretty big decision when they pick a services company. And you got to know what makes them trust you really quickly. Back to the founders and they're working with people they know, they from previous jobs, from previous customers. The people are doing business with them because they're good and because they trust them. But that took years. If you're building a customer, you want to shrink that years of trust building and capability understanding, you want to shrink it to a couple months. So you have to do things that shrink that acceptance time. It could be a great product, it could be great content around that product, it could be a great personality, it could be knowing the right things to say, where the customers generally feel threatened and where they feel they can benefit from it. So the founders have to be able to get to that point really quickly with a customer. And then when he's seeing demand or she's seeing demand, teach the sales guy to do the same thing.
And I feel like this is a big difference between selling other things like B2C or outside of tech, outside of IT. I feel like in B2B tech sales, it's so much about trust because those projects can be hundreds and thousands of dollars, and it's so much trust involved in collaboration, right? So I feel like that's the key difference in B2B tech sales, like trust building. But what do you think about it? What do you think about selling B2B tech sales versus other things? Do you agree? It's like, I mean, you said that actually, I just repeated what you said, but
Yeah.
like, what are the key differences you see between selling
Well,
something
one
else?
is,
Mhm.
um, what do the customers need help with? If something goes sideways, they want to know you're there to fix it,
So
right?
reliability, approachability, being able
Approachability, reliability, accountability. It's like the capability of, ooh, it's not working for whatever reason, right? It could be a million reasons. Sales guy's going to sit there and get them through that rough spot. Um, Sales guy is going to help them. sell it to other people in their organization. It could be the executives higher than them that are writing the checks. It could be the compliance people. It could be the financial people. It could be the users. They want help in getting this adopted in their organization so that it sticks and it's useful and it's a success for them. And, not the least of it is that they get some credit for making this decision, invited to speak at events, write, co-author articles, which means the sales guy essentially, writes the article with the client's thoughts and client says, yeah, I would have loved to write that article. Well, we both did. Um, little things like that.
How does
So,
that work? I don't know that strategy, and it sounds super interesting. So how does it work? Like this?
so let's say a customer, well, you pick the technology it is. You pick the kind of function or the technology. You tell me, Matt, and then I'll spin it back to you.
Okay, no, like let's say like Salesforce.
Salesforce, great. So, guy it's a big decision to pick Salesforce. It's a painful, big decision. It's a complicated product. Uh, Sales guy, and customer build a great relationship. There's things to overcome. Sales guy helps them overcome it. Uh, the sales guy has the metrics and the capability and the tools to help the customer understand. And this is the benefit your um, organization is getting from your incredibly wise decision to implement and buy Salesforce. The sales guy writes the article, gets the marketing team to write the article. Now it's, AI and there's, voice to text translations, et cetera. So he says, you know what? We're going to write an article on all the smart things you did in choosing Salesforce and implementing Salesforce and scaling Salesforce. We're going to write an article on how you did that and the special things that are required. Goes back, writes the article. Is this how you do? Is this what happened? That is pretty much what happened. Let's tweak it here. Let's tweak it there. Fine. Here's second draft. Joe and Larry, or Matt and Larry, Salesforce scaled and implemented correctly by Matt and Larry, and you get some credit. You get invited to speak places, and it's valuable to go speak at
As
places.
a client, as a customer, you go and speak places at like Salesforce conference, for example, about
Exactly.
that. And then you become like the poster child for them,
Exactly.
indirectly endorsing them with your company name, even though you're like one of the guys who wanted to kind of be on that stage because it's obviously beneficial to you to build your personal brand as an employee as well.
Exactly.
That is very clever strategy. That is very clever. I know companies use that, but I never,
You got to have a pretty deep relationship with your
Mhm.
customer to do that. It's
Mhm.
it's not a guy who saw your ad on Facebook.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So it's post sales. You start doing that with them. You still start leveraging this. Obviously, this is way better than like a case study. This is way deeper on a way deeper level. That is really cool. Huh, those sales are way more complicated. Very like knowledge based, very relationship based, very trust based. A lot of time goes into it, sounds like.
And you know what? Your sales guy, if he or she is doing stuff like that, they're worth whatever they're making.
But
You know,
mhm.
don't give them like a bogus bogey. Oh, you didn't make your bogey. We're going to cut you didn't make this extra 20,000 bucks. It's like, really?
But at that point, they're not even a sales guy in like a traditional sense, right? At that point, they're like go to markets, interviewer, like, they're like just a very clever marketer at that point, plus a salesperson.
Yeah, it's sort of like half of what a CEO's job is.
That is so interesting because this like transcends of like what traditional sales used to be on or like how people think about it. Like those strategies transcended a lot. Just I'm slowly gonna be wrapping up. Just
Yeah.
have one last question for in terms of sales. I think you mentioned conferences and like being more in the field. How do you feel about the state of that? Like the people in IT, consulting and tech, do you feel like they go to conferences a lot, grab business cards and establish relationships and make sales through that these days? Or do you feel it's outdated method?
So I think smaller, intimate, sort of more casual events, really useful. Uh, Big conferences, not useful. But big conferences have never been useful. 30 years ago, it's like we keep spending 100,000 bucks to go to this conference. We never get a customer, and the sales guy, oh, well, my customers are there. I get to see them.
They just
Um,
want to drink the wine and the after party.
there's that going on, which might be important, but you are looking for new customers. So I think really focused um, conferences are good. Like we used to go to a logistics conference where decision makers were present, but and the Gartner Group conferences are good. But you can't be the presenter. Your customer has to be the presenter.
Like you shouldn't be selling yourself. You should have somebody
The
indirectly
customer should
assist
be
you.
making a use case on what
Right.
they did. You could stand there on the stage with them. You could have written the presentation for them. You could have practiced it with them, but the customer's doing the presentation. You're there for backup. Um, so in any of the conferences we do, the customer mandatory. A customer has to make the presentation, and a customer that's hopefully a bit of a brand himself, a bit of a known name, right? At least in your little world,
Bubble.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. To get up there and buy a keynote or buy a speaker spot in conference room 4F in the bottom of the Javits Center, way down the corridor, light is never shown in the room. It- Not good. People will show up, but the buyers don't show up. And we've never made a sale that way. But if a customer's doing it, we do. And you
Just to underline that, like that potential customer that is on this stage, they actually want to do things like that because they get like great treatment, like they feel great about themselves being on the stage, right? There's like this, I don't want to say like ego element involved, but like I would love to be on this stage. I mean, who wouldn't? Like it sounds great to be on the
well,
stage.
so I have a couple stories about that. There's that. There's some people who are very, this is my IT community. I want to share with it because people share with me. I share with them.
Like a give back kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it's but very practical. It's like when I have a problem, I go to this guy at this company and he helps me and I help him. And here's this audience. These people know me. So there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit about being on stage. And there's a little bit about you never know who you might need to know when corporate restructuring comes around.
Right. So you want to build a personal brand too. And being on
Yeah,
the stage helps with that.
being on the stage. And my last little story about being on the stage is I worked, it was a pretty big company. And we recruited a guy from a bank. And I'm like, why are you working for us now instead of, a big fancy New York bank? It's like, he goes, I asked myself, do I want to be the guy in the audience listening, or do I want to be the guy on the stage with all the information, with all the expertise, with all the knowledge that people are listening to? He just knew who he was. There was one thing. That's who he wanted to be. Some guys want to sit in the audience.
That is making so much sense. So to summarize some of the takeaways, I'm not gonna be able to summarize everything, but just to summarize some of the key takeaways from what I'm getting from, conversation with you for everybody here. And then correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know if I got this right or if I got this completely wrong. But to me, it sounds like selling services, IT services can still work, uh, whether this is in person, like real life or digital channels, to people you haven't met before. You can use those different tools to accelerate the process, but it all comes down to relationship building, and you can't take away that essential part of relationship building with those people, the trust building with those people. And this can be accelerated. You can figure out ways to do it way faster than over like being working with somebody for 8 years and then pull them as a customer. But like you can accelerate it, but you can't skip that part. So this whole thing about going out there, finding clients, it's about really accelerating the speed of your relationship building, trust building, but you cannot skip that point. That's like a big point I'm getting from this conversation. Let me know, Larry, if I got
I
this right
absolutely
or.
believe that. I
Mhm.
absolutely believe that. And I'd never back down from it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was super insightful. And yeah, thanks for joining me today, Larry.
You're quite welcome. It was delightful spending time with you, getting to know you a little bit better, and good luck with your future endeavors, whether they be in the next couple days or in the next bunch of months.
Thanks, Larry.
Sure, Matt.